Next up, I would like to introduce our final keynote before we go off and do panels and things like that. Dr. Pamela Kastner is here from Pennsylvania. She is an educational consultant at the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistant Network, Patton Harrisburg, where she serves as the state lead consultant for literacy. Dr. Kastner, along with the Patton Literacy team, has led Pennsylvania's dyslexia screening and early literacy intervention pilot program, extension, and expansion. She was part of a research team investigating the impact of explicit instruction and phonemic awareness on student literacy outcomes. Dr. Kastner is an adjunct professor at Mount St. Joseph University at the Reading Science program, where she teaches in the master's and doctoral program. Dr. Kastner is also an adjunct professor at Wilson College, where she teaches letters courses. Dr. Kastner has the honor of serving as the president of the Reading League Pennsylvania, the Reading League Journal's practitioner editorial board, and is a member of the Science of Reading, a defining movement coalition. Welcome, Dr. Kastner.
First of all, I just want you to stand up. You've been sitting for a little while. So stand up and stretch and yawn and do whatever you need to do, move, dance, whatever you need to do. You've been sitting for a little bit, so I just probably need to stand up. Why don't you do this? I'm going to give you a zero noise signal to come back with me, but here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you a clap. Listen first. Ready? That's the clap I'm going to give you, and I want you to clap back. So let's practice it. Ready? Okay, so you've been learning a lot this morning. Why don't you turn and talk to a partner and tell them something meaningful that you learned today. You could say, the most meaningful thing I learned today, and then your partner will say, and this is how I'm taking it back to my practice. I'm going to give you 1 minute, begin, and then I'll clap you back. Okay. Okay, so if you can sit down, we'll get started. All right. So during Natalie's presentation, the volunteers are so kind to bring around to your table this little slip of paper. It's also on our screen. I don't know if any of you know me at all, but if you do, you know that I'm kind of like obsessed with resources for teachers. And so I create wakelets and Padlets and all kinds of things to kind of help teachers transfer knowledge back into practice. I'm not a huge fan, I will say, of teachers pay teachers, so maybe that's what I'm just doing. I'm giving it to you for free. So what I did is I created a wakelet that aligns with this presentation, so you'll see the handouts on there. You can use your phone to do the QR code there, which just means just open up your camera. If you open up your camera and you place it towards this little square here, it'll open up that wakelet. The first thing on the wakelet is the PowerPoint presentation. And then what I've done is I've added additional resources for you to deepen your knowledge around the topics that we're talking about today. 45 minutes is not a long time, so I'm going to do my best to share with you the most essential things about phonemic awareness and then leave you with some resources, okay? Like you, my passion is teaching. I was telling Dr. Whedon, I think last evening, I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 8 years old. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And last night, Kareem Weaver said, you know, it's not about our work, it's not about our job, it's about our work. And I was telling my friend Maria this morning, you really can't separate out who I am with what I do. I'm just one of those really lucky people, probably like you too, right? We know what we were born to do, and we have a great honor in doing it every single day. And so I am very passionate about my work, but my work is my life too, right? And so as Tarja said, I'm the lead for literacy in Pennsylvania at Patton, the president of the Reading League in Pennsylvania, and I have a great honor of teaching in the doctoral program at Mount St. Joseph University in Ohio. So that's my passion, but this is my life, right? We have our family too. So this is my husband over there with kind of like the little bit of blondish gray hair. He said he's never gray, right? But we just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary in June. So that's my husband. Thank you. My husband, Sean. And then you can tell my son's over there to the left, right? So that's Justin. And up at the top there is his wife, Amber. And there's me. And then there's 3 of my grandchildren, Lola, Layla, and Leo. All right? And isn't that great? Teachers, we love alliteration. It's great for phonemic awareness, too. Let's not forget that. So Lola, Layla, Leo, and then along came Louie. All right? So Lola, Layla, Leo, Louie. Now, my daughter is over there to the right, Jessica, with her husband, Casey. Now, when she was growing up, she always said to me, Mom, when I grow up, if I have a little girl, I'm going to name her Lily. So she just named her Lily just because she was always going to name her daughter Lily. So I said, oh, you know, literacy's my passion. I'm a national letters trainer. Lola, Layla, Leo, Louie, right? Lily. And then she got pregnant again. And I said, well, you can't mess that up for me, right? All that great alliteration. And she said, Mom, did you raise a strong, independent woman? And I said, shucks, yes, I did. So are you ready? Lola's at the top. Lola, Layla, Leo, Louie, Lily in the pink, and Daphne. Okay, so, but I said when I get really old, both of them are made at the front of my mouth, kind of with my tongue up here, oh, right? And d. So I said, well, if I get really old, if I just do this, oh, or d, Nan is calling for me, right? So there you go. They're my life. They really are. They keep me busy and hopping too. All right, so I want you to be engaged. Afternoons are hard because you've been, you know, just had lunch. So here's what I want you to do. You need an elbow partner. It does have to be partners if you can. If you can't, it can be a trio. But you need a 1 and a 2. All right, so you need a partner. Now, here's the hardest thing about that. You have to remember who is the 1 and who is the 2. All right, so find a partner, and 1s and 2s, and then introduce yourself if you don't know each other, and I'll bring you back with that clap, okay? All right. Okay, if you're a 1, raise your hand. If you're a 2, raise your hand. If you're a 1, raise your hand. If you're a 2, raise your hand. If you're a 2, raise your hand. I almost got you there, huh? Okay. So here's the thing. I try to model what best practices for teaching are when I present. So if you're ever with me, you'll never see me ask you to raise your hand. Tar just said there's like 560 of us in here. Let's say I was teaching you something and I was checking for understanding and you raised your hand. All right, so who's raising their hands? The ones who know the answer or the ones who don't? The ones who know the answer. So I call on 1 out of 560 to inform my next instructional move. Is that a good ratio of an evidence base to stand on? Absolutely not. Every time I Google classrooms, guess what I see? Google images for classrooms. I see a teacher at the front, and I see kids raising their hands. Right? We have to make sure all are responding because I want to formatively assess where you are so I know what to do next. All right, so you're also going to be reading research together. So we might have 1s read and then 2s and see who does a better job of reading it, right? And you're going to be summarizing it. Now, Natalie shared because, but, so. We're going to have a summary activity at the end for because, but, so. I'm telling you that now so you can be thinking about that as you go along. I'm going to help you a little bit because we're going to do one for because, all right, just to get you started. All right, here we go. All right, how many of you know the knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading? All right, let's raise your hands high. Okay, so I have those on the Wakelet. The knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading are what every teacher of reading should know and be able to do. They were developed by the International Dyslexia Association, but they're not just for kids with dyslexia. As you can see, they're for teachers of reading. So if you want to know what teachers should know, understand the knowledge they should have and what they should be able to do, these are the standards. So if you see in the left-hand corner like KPSTR and a number, that means that content is aligned to the knowledge and practice standards for that content, okay? And they're on the Wakelet for you. All right, and this is just a quick roadmap of where we're going in 45 minutes. Okay, first of all, I want to share with you that teaching phonemic awareness is joyful. Say that with me. Joyful. It is so much fun. It is playing with language. Who agrees with me that teaching phonemic awareness is joyful? So I see a lot of you already, right? Kids just feel like they're playing with language, right? They don't know that they are becoming aware of the speech sound system of our language, right? And so it's joyful. That's what I want to start out with. And there's the rope, right? So I can't go past that speaker, but I want you to focus right there on that arrow. And what does it say? Everybody read it with me. Phonological awareness. We're really honing in on phonological awareness. However, it's an integrated system. Say that with me. Integrated system. We need to be supporting teachers in all of these areas, right? It's a language system, a system of language. So even though I'm narrowing in here, I don't want you to forget that we have to teach all of this directly, explicitly, systematically. Phonological awareness is absolutely essential in an alphabetic language like ours. Say that with me. Phonological awareness is absolutely essential in an alphabetic language like ours, but it is insufficient. Your kids can be great if you say, let's try it, you're probably pretty good at it. Say MIP, change to S. My word is, oh, great substitution, one of the most difficult skills you can do in phonemic awareness. But if you don't map phonemes to graphemes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's the Velcro. It's laying down the pathway on which to map graphemes. But we have to teach it explicitly. Because if you're saying duh, or puh, or guh, when you're teaching stop sounds, right? Well, we'll do it wrong. Say duh with me, ready? Duh. That's the sound for D, that represents the grapheme D. If I say duh, my kids say. And when they spell, because guess what? There is a reciprocal relationship between decoding and encoding, between phonology and orthography. If I say duh, my kids write the word dog, and they spell it D-U-O-G. And I say, what is going on there? Right? So anytime I go into a classroom, I'm really listening, and you'll see in classrooms where teachers have this knowledge about how to teach the speech sounds, when they're doing a stop sound, the kids are doing this. They're clipping their sounds. They know we have to clip the sounds. They're not adding that schwa. It begins with speech. Why? Our language originated with speech. We created print. We created an alphabet to make speech permanent. Right? When you're reading, you are reading phonemes. You are reading morphemes. Some languages have a real nice one-to-one correspondence. It means when I see this symbol, it always makes this sound. So let's just think about long A. Do we have a language like that? How do we spell long A? A-Y, A-I, E-I, V-C-E, God help us, E-I-G-H, right? So we're lucky, though, in our language. We have a really robust language. And we borrowed from so many languages. It makes it so rich, but it also makes it complex. So why would we think ever that kids could just intuit it? We have to teach it. But it began with speech, so that's where we begin. But we don't forget about print. We have to map it to the print too. All right? So we're teaching all of this. We're honing in on that. But don't forget, language is important, right? All of it. All right, so what is it? Here's how we're going to do these slides. I'm going to show you a slide. The parts that are not bolded or underlined, I am going to read. And the parts that are bolded and underlined, you are going to read. Everybody. Here we go. Ready? Phonological awareness is the awareness of, or sensitivity to the sound structure of language. Phonological awareness is an umbrella term used to describe awareness at different levels of spoken language. All right? Phonemic awareness is the capacity to attend to and manipulate phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest units of speech sound. Oops, that's you. Sorry. Go ahead. Smallest units of speech sounds that make a difference in the meaning of a word. Phonemic awareness is the most sophisticated and most important level of phonological awareness. All right? Let's say your kids are great at, if I say camp, add ground. Put it together, what's my word? Oh, compound words, good for you for blending out. If I say at, blend it together, that's onset rhyme. Great job. If your kids are good at those two skills, That's great, but it's not going to help them learn to read in an alphabetic language. They have to get to the phoneme level, the individual sound, because we map graphemes, letter and letter patterns, to phonemes. When we read, we're bringing pronunciation to the graphemes that we see, and when we spell, where do we begin? What do kids do when they begin to spell? Where do they begin, speech or print? They begin with speech. That's right. Why do we have word walls then? Better have a sound spelling wall, right? So the phoneme is an individual sound. So if my word was hot and I changed my ah to it, hit, right? So I've changed the meaning too, right? So they're interdependent, phonology, orthography, and meaning. We're bonding those three so that when kids come to a word that's unknown and they decode that word and they map it to meaning, they own it. Decoding is the way to get there, though, but they can't live there. They have to orthographically map it. But without phonology, they're at risk. They cannot do it. Most kids who have reading difficulties, not all, but most, have a phonological core deficit. Say that with me. Phonological core deficit. It means they have difficulty analyzing the speech sounds in language. Why is that? Because when we speak in co-articulated streams, and we only speak for meaning. But if we're going to learn to read and spell in a morphophonemic alphabetic language like ours, they have to be able to break that speech stream apart into individual sounds. And we don't talk like it, unless we're teaching phonemic awareness. Right? Okay. So, ones. Who remembers who they're ones? Raise your hand. Ones. Summarize phonological and phonemic awareness for twos. Say, phonological and phonemic awareness are, and turn and talk to twos. And twos, you listen respectfully. Go. Ones, you're on for a minute. All right. Twos, say thank you. Your turn's coming. All right. So, given the time we have, we won't live in the land of research, but we do have to, we're always sharing with you what is most effective, just as we've heard Maria say earlier. No one's going to come back to you in 20 years and say, oh, that phonological awareness stuff, no, we don't have to do that, no. That's what Dr. Louisa Moats, I hope some of you know who she is, she calls it settled science. Say that with me, settled science. We know we have to teach it, but what does the research say? All right, we're back to it. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a competition. Ones, you're going to do the first research statement, and twos, you're going to do the second to see who does a better job. Ones, are you ready? Poor readers and spellers, especially in the twos, can you beat them? Phonemic segmentation and blending measures along with letter naming are what's that word there? Best predictors? Do you see that? Phonemic segmentation and blending measures along with letter naming are the best predictors. Kindergarten teachers, I taught kindergarten 18 years, some of the best years of my life. What's that telling me I have to teach? Blending and segmenting and letter naming, right? Because whether students are going to be successful, right? When you build a house, what do? You start out with a strong foundation. Because of course we want our kids reading for meaning and reading for comprehension. That's the goal. But my friend Anita Archer says, there's no comprehension strategy that will overcome the fact that you cannot read the words. You cannot read the words, you cannot comprehend them. We have a moral obligation to ensure that our kids are reading accurately and automatically so that they can have access to that rich language and comprehension that Natalie talked to us about. Without it, they'll never have it unless they listen to it auditorily, right? It's a moral imperative. We know what happens. We heard Kareem talk to us this morning and last night. All right, we're going to do this one together. Training in phonemic awareness improves students' ability to learn the alphabetic principle and to recognize words in print, right? So what that means is we're teaching kids to become aware of the individual sounds and words so they can map them to graphemes, to letters and letter patterns. If they don't analyze that speech sound, guess where it won't show up? It's not going to show up in their spelling or their writing because you can't write or spell a phoneme that you have not analyzed. So my biggest obsession right now actually is spelling. Spelling is visible language. Show me what a student is writing, and I can tell you exactly where their phonology, and I can see heads nodding, phonology, orthography, and morphology is. I'll give you one example today. Because if the phonemes aren't there, the graphemes aren't going to be there, right? So why? All right, so ones, you're back on. Faced with an alphabetic script, the child's level of phonemic awareness on entering school may be the success that she or he will experience in learning to read, and of the likelihood that she or he will fail. And now twos, you're on. Measures of school children's ability to attend to and manipulate phonemes strongly correlate with their reading success. All the kind of important. Look at that citation. Everybody shout out what year? What year is it now? Oh, 32 years ago? Marilyn Adams' seminal text, if you haven't read it yet, Beginning to Read, Thinking and Learning About Print, still holds so much weight. All right, now twos, it's your turn because ones were on before. Twos, tell ones why phonemic awareness is so essential. I'm going to give you a language stem. Here we go. Begin by saying, phonemic awareness is essential because, turn and talk to your partner. Phonemic awareness is essential because. All right. All right, at one of these points I'm going to ask you to really listen to your partner because I'm going to ask for brilliant responses. All right, so one term that came up there that maybe still be unknown out there, I'm not sure, is alphabetic principle. That's the understanding that our speech sounds are represented by graphemes, by letters, right, that they're connected. Okay, so how? Where do we start? Well, we start with structured literacy and the principles of instruction for structured literacy. The teaching is explicit. Too often our kids have had to figure out what the teacher's trying. What's the teacher want me to learn, right? With explicit instruction, there's no mystery. It's very clear what the students are going to learn. It's very explicit. And there is teacher modeling. You probably, if you're friends of Anita Archer or any of her research, I hope you are, or her practices, she often talks about this as I do, we do, you do. And so I didn't put a slide in here that I sometimes put in about explicit instruction, but I do, we do, you do will work maybe for a typical developing reader, but a student who may be at risk might need this. I do, I do, I do, I do, we do, we do, we do, we do, we do, we do, you do with a partner, you do with a partner, you do with a partner, you do, you do, you do, I check. Right? And that might be a student who sometimes we say is slightly at risk, right? When a student comes to an unknown word, if they're a typically developing reader, if we have taught them phonemic awareness and phonics, mapping speech sounds to graphemes, and they decode that word in 1 to 4 exposures, say it with me, 1 to 4 exposures, they own it. It's right back here in their brain in the visual word form area. Like most words yours are, they're sight words, as if by sight. But do we have all typically developing readers in our classrooms? No. So another aspect of explicit instruction, just like the we do, we do, we do, we do, we do, is practice, 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 practice. How did you get good at anything that you're good at, that you don't think about? Practice. Ever drive somewhere and think, how did I get here? Yeah, I've done that, right? And so at one point, you were beside somebody, a more skilled person, it was my dad, God help him, and you were learning all the sub-skills of learning to drive. You were thinking about the steering wheel, you were thinking about the cars around, you were thinking about the gas, you were thinking about the brake, and God help you, I learned in stick shift, you were definitely thinking when you were on the hill and there's something behind you, right? But with practice, 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 and feedback, 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 corrective feedback at the point of error. Pam, look out for that hydrant, you're going to hit it, right? And affirmative feedback. Oh, you did a great job parallel parking. He never said that, right? But any skill we're good at, we're automatic at. Just like Natalie was talking about cognitive load and working memory. If our kids are so focused on decoding words, they cannot gain meaning. We all have those kids. My oldest, Lola, profoundly dyslexic. Talk about a knife to the heart, right? So IQ here, right? And her neuropsych, language gifted, first percentile phonemic awareness, right? So she'd get to a word, and we would read, and she'd sound it out. And you know those kids, it's like they are bleeding, they are sweating. And then they get to the end of the sentence, and we say, tell me what you just read about. And they look at you like, what are you saying? I just moved mountains to decode that, right? Oftentimes, we're intervening only with phonics when we also have to couple it with phonemic awareness. We forget about our language. It began at the oral level. Same thing with the language. Nana Bragg, my 2-year-old Louie, and all my 2-year-olds when they were 2 years old, Lola's going to be 13 in January, God help me, they always ask for assistance. They never ask for help. Nana, may I have assistance? So I'm telling you, when you take them to Panera, that gets heads turning, right? Because they don't expect this language to come out of a 2-year-old's mouth. But how long did it take me to pair help and assistance and drop the help eventually? Because then they know assistance is a more robust word for help, right? Why did I do that? So when they come to the word assistance in text, they know what it means. And they've been taught to decode it. It's an integrated system. Say that with me. It's an integrated system. And we need to teach it explicitly and systematically. Remember I said long A? You're like, oh my gosh. A-I, A-Y. Yeah, so if I was on the plane and I went out to play, right? One of the principles of spelling is we spell by position. If I'm on the plane, a landform, right, how am I spelling my long A? A-I. If I go out to play on the plane, I'm spelling it. Do you know we spell by position? Yes, I didn't know long ago, right, that the reason it's A-I is because it's in the middle of the syllable or the beginning of the syllable, and it's A-Y at the end of a syllable. Our language makes sense when someone teaches it to us, so we can teach it to kids. But we teach it systematically. Think back to Kareem and his stairs, right? From least complex to most complex, to most frequent to least frequent, right? I'm not starting out with E-I-G-H, right? So when you look at curriculums, that's what you should be looking for. Does it have a logical scope and sequence from least complex to most complex? And do kids get enough practice, right? Because this is what happens always when I was teaching. I go to the teacher and they say, oh, we taught that last year. Well, they didn't learn it. And oftentimes what it is, it's a practice gap. We taught it, they didn't learn it. They didn't have enough practice. So systematic. Cumulative, that means we're going back to things that we have learned prior, and we're giving that practice so that they kind of have to retrieve it from long-term memory. That retrieval process makes that memory stronger. And we want to distribute the practice too. Everybody here, if you've been to college, you all have, there's been a time you've crammed, right? You take the test, and do you keep that in memory or do you forget it? You forget it, you crammed it, right? It wasn't distributed, it was massed practice. So we need spaced practice, right? And deliberate practice. And we need to retrieve those things so it sticks, right? And then multimodal. I'll show you a slide later. I don't even know if we'll get to it, so I'll do it here. We need language by ear, language by eye, language by hand, language by mouth, right? So when we think about phonemic awareness, it's all auditory. And for some of your kids, that's just fine. But other kids need to see it. They need to say it. They need to move it. Because phonemes are elusive. I say them, they're gone, and they're abstract, right? So lots of kids are going to need more language by eye, language by ear, language by hand, language by mouth. Multimodal. I'm building neural pathways in the brain, and I want to strengthen those. So I have to bring in language in different pathways. One pathway often isn't enough, all right? And then multilingual. If we get to the slide, we'll talk about phonology, the speech sounds of our language, orthography, how the speech sounds are written in a written system, a written language, morphology, the meaningful units, semantics, the meanings of the words, syntax, the grammar, right? How the word portrays like noun, verb, adjective, adverb, right? Appositives, all these things that we need to embed in context. And then pragmatics, social language, and discourse, right? So we'll look at that. And etymology, where did the word come from? I taught kindergarten, and one of my kindergartners wanted to write the word photo. Ready? Let's do photo. Ready? Photo, tap sounds. Oh, oh. And what did they want to write with for the F? And oh gosh, is it time to tell them that's a Greek word? And that's why, right? There is a method to the madness, right, when we know our language. So teach it explicitly. And where we have to start is with phonemes and teaching those accurately. These are pictures from lips, because phonemes are sounds and articulatory gestures. Say that with me. Phonemes are sounds and articulatory gestures. Kids are feeling what is happening in their mouth, lips, teeth, tongue, right? And so when they're making errors, when they're making phonemes, with da or ga or ta, or one of my students in kindergarten who loved fish, where are my kindergarten teachers? Every day in journal writing, I like fish, I like fish. I was like, oh God, I know you like fish. But he was spelling it with a V. And so every day I would sit down and I would say, this is Pam Kastner before she knew better, and say, remember, fish begins with what letter? F, right? And so I was trying to fix it with an orthographic error. This is how you spell this sound. This is how the sound is done in written language. He was not making a phonological error. He was making a phonological error, not an orthographic error. Because let's make the sound for, put your hand here. But now we're going to turn our voice box on. Ah, my mouth, lips, teeth, tongue, airflow is all doing the same thing for and but with, put your hand here. No voice box on. Now for the V sound. Ah, he was turning his voice box on. It was a phonological error that I was trying to correct with an orthographic error correction. So every day I would sit down with him and he would write F-I-S-H, and then the rest of the day, if he wrote anything with the sound, he spelled it with a, that's right. This is what Maria is talking about. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. It informs my prescriptive and diagnostic teaching, right? Know better, do better. No shame zone. My Twitter handle is live to learn, because I believe that. As educators, we have a moral imperative. If we are to serve as teachers, we must serve as learners our entire lives, right? So if I come back here a year from now, I'll say, I'm sorry I didn't tell you this last year, but I learned about it, right? We learn so we can serve, right? So articulatory gestures, you have to teach them first, because phonemes are sounds, but they're articulatory gestures, right? So the amazing Linnea Airy, the goddess of all. Let's all just read this together. Ready? The easiest way to detect phonemes is to monitor where your mouth is positioned and when it moves to another position to say the succession of phonemes. What year? 2022. She's been at a long, long time. But the easiest way is to help kids be aware in initial instruction what their mouth, lips, teeth, tongue is doing. Right? Where in the mouth it's happening, place, the front of our mouth, the middle of our mouth, the back of our mouth, and manner. What are our lips doing? What are our teeth doing? What's the airflow like? Is our voice box on? Right? Because what do they come to us with? Speech or print? Speech. We're capitalizing on what they already have, right? And we're making it very explicit, and then they're mapping it to what they don't have, right? The graphemes, right? But we're anchoring it there. That's what we need to do. So here's what I want you to do. You need to look at your partner, watch their mouth, right? And they can even put their hand here. And what you're going to do is you're going to say, you're really going to look closely at their mouth. You're going to say the word thing. Ones will do it for twos. Twos will do it for ones. Ready? Turn and do that. Just say the word thing. T-H-I-N-G. Say that word. And watch their mouth. Thing. Thing. What do you notice? I got to see how much time I have left. What do you notice? So anybody out there, what did you notice about their mouth? That's beautiful. I like that. Where did their mouth start? What did you see? Did you see this? This is the most attractive sound you'll ever teach kids. Sorry, I had to do it. Right? So this is probably what you saw. All right? So your tongue, right, is positioned beneath the upper teeth. Watch this. Do it with me. Yes. And then think. See my mouth open? My mouth opens for the and then thing. Now hold your nose when you do that. Thing. Ah, what happened? Stop the sound. Nasal sounds come through our nose, right? Do it with me. Hold your nose. Now ready? And hold your nose. And now So that's why you sound so funny when you have a cold, right? Because you can't get the airflow through your nose, right? So truly, kids are feeling what's happening in their mouth. And we want to anchor that, right, to graphemes once we've taught the phonemes. And that's lips. All right, so here we go. Ready? Again, the goddess Linnea Airy. Graphemes and spellings may help you you guys are quiet, come on. Graphemes and spellings may help you detect phonemes, but they can be misleading. You need to focus on analyzing the sounds and spoken words and the mouth positions and movements that accompany sounds to break the words into the smallest pieces. Exactly what you'd hear from Louise and Moats, too. Of course, we want to map phonemes to graphemes, but we need to anchor in phonemes and then map the graphemes to them. And when kids, here's the thing, guys. As soon as my kids in a scope and sequence, let's say they knew, I don't know, 3, 4 consonants and 2 short vowels, or maybe even 1, immediately I have taught those speech sounds, but I am mapping them to print. I'm not waiting until we've taught all 44 speech sounds, and now all of a sudden I'm going to map them to the grapheme. When I say s, I'll tell you what's happening in your mouth, but if in my phonics scope and sequence I'm supposed to be teaching the grapheme S, I am mapping that grapheme right away. There is no waiting. I anchor in what kids come to us with already, speech, but I map it to print, right? Right? So if I say sat, my kids say luckily my kids, typically like a phonics, there's no universal one, but sat pin usually is one that starts. So if my kids knew the S and the A and the T and they knew the letter sound correspondences, I might say sat, tap sounds, sat. I'm connecting those phonemes. I'm not going s-at. That's also Linnea Airy's recent research about connected phonation. I'm putting those phonemes together. Do it with me. Sat, sat, right? And then I'm saying, what's our first sound? S. How do we spell s? S. What's our second sound? Ah. And how do we spell that sound? And I might put those together. Sat. What's our ending sound? T. And how do we represent that sound? T's. Ready? Sat. Blend it. Sat. I'm not waiting. I can't. I'm missing an opportunity if I don't. So lots of schools, you probably, ooh, yikes, new to high heels. COVID. All right, so you guys have seen these maybe? Kid lips from the amazing Dr. Mary Dahlgren. They're great for kids because they're real kids' lips. Some teachers are taking pictures of their own kids just to make sure they're accurate, right? But we're showing kids, right? And your speech language pathologist, say that with me. Your speech language pathologist is your BFF. Next to the custodian and the secretary, right? They know so much about language, right? And you must have these little tiny mirrors so kids can see what's happening in their mouth. And they're inexpensive, right? So kids need to see, hear, feel. Remember back to that multimodal? And I'm changing my language. I'll have to tell Mary Dahlgren. But I say sound spelling wall. Because I have a sound wall, because I'm anchoring in speech, but I'm adding graphemes and guide words, right? Because I have to move it into print, too. And Mary would say the same thing. Now, there's a resource on the Wakelet for you. Blendable Sounds. If you don't know Dr. Holly Lane and the resources at the University of Florida Literacy Institute Resource Hub, I have a link for you on there. They're absolutely fabulous resources. And in this Blendable Sounds, she teaches you how to accurately make the phonemes of our language. And blendable, which means they are continuous. So I'm not saying s, at, I'm saying sat. Now, s is a continuous sound, but let's say toad, t is a stop sound. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hook my t to my o, right? I don't want to say t-ode. I'm going to say toad, right? See how I'm blending that together? Connective phonation. I can't be chopping it around, right? So if you want an accurate model, she is a great resource, right? So why is this hard, phonemic awareness for kids? It's elusive. I say a phoneme and boop, it's gone. It's in the air and it's gone. Dr. Marilyn Adams wrote a great article called Phonemes Are Elusive, because they are. They're co-articulated. They're smushed together. We kind of lie to kids when we say the sound d is represented by this, right? Because if I say desk, say that with me, desk. What do you hear? D. Good job. Say ladder. Ladder. What do you hear? Tongue flapping happening there. What about dress? What do you hear? J. Right? My mouth is getting ready from the d to the r. So it's puckering up. So it sounds more like j. And if it was unvoiced, it would be like tree, right? So phonemes are rarely spoken completely in isolation, except for I or A or maybe O. But they have friends that they're beside. And when they're beside friends in a word, guess what happens? They change. It's called allophonic variation. Say that with me. Allophonic variation. How's that for a tier 3 word? Huh? So that happens, right? So we have to be aware of that. And it's going to show up in spelling, for sure. The amazing Dr. Louisa Motes says phonemes are parking spots for graphemes. It means that think about a parking lot, right? And then it's an empty parking lot, and the word might be fast. Fast. So the spaces for fast all lined up fast. But then we line them up with cars. If I do not analyze a phoneme, I will not show you a grapheme. That's the truth of it. And I'll show you in spelling. And, it's interdependent. Graphemes depend on phonemes, right? When we're reading print, we're bringing pronunciation to it. We're bringing the speech sounds to the print. That's what you're doing. Of course, with morphemes as well. But when you're spelling, you always begin with speech, right? So Dr. Katie Pace-Miles is one of the best researchers in the entire country. She's right here. She needs to wave because, honestly, she is amazing. You need to follow her. Dr. Miles is an amazing researcher, but she also so values teachers and practitioners, like in the classrooms with them, in with pre-K, in with K, like action research in the classroom. It's just so amazing. You definitely have to go to her webpage and her resource page, and we were lucky at the Reading League Pennsylvania to have her present, and the second time she came, she brought her students. So what do you notice on this screen here? This is Tori Mulder from City University of New York, from the Brooklyn Literacy Resource Lab. And what do you see there? She has lips, right? So the kids are looking at what their mouth is doing. And then what do you see above it? Graphemes. Graphemes. And this is what? Preschool, right? It's preschool. They are mapping phonemes. They're becoming aware of what the speech sounds look like, how they feel in their mouth, what their lip, teeth, tongue are doing. And then they're mapping that. You see the lip pictures down here, kids, probably from her class. Low income, inner city, Katie says. And then letters. We're mapping graphemes. But she didn't start there, she started here. But she didn't neglect adding the graphemes, right? So go to that website too. There's great resources from all her students. And when we're teaching, we teach explicitly, right? So we have an instructional routine. Maria talked about instructional routines. They're so important. Teachers should have instructional routines in their tool belt. Oh, I have a routine for letter naming. I have a routine for letter sounds. I have a routine for teaching speech sounds. I have a routine for word chaining. I have a routine. It reduces the cognitive load for kids, and it makes things predictable. And I have a routine for teaching letter sounds. And this comes from the most recent curriculum from UFLI, the University of Florida Literacy Institute Foundations. I'm just seeing how much time I have left here. Okay, so we are going to learn how to make the D sound. Are you ready? To make the D sound, tap your tongue right behind your the top of front teeth like this. Watch me. D. I'm going to clip it. Keep your voice box on when you make the D sound. The D sound is a stop sound. That means the airflow stops. Watch me. D. Your turn. Turn to your partner and make the sound for D. And then how do we spell that sound, everybody? Right? So we're anchoring in multimodal handwriting. Please don't neglect handwriting. I am teaching it explicitly, and they're making the sound when they do it. And I have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to just show you what I have left briefly. We're teaching systematically, which means we begin with the outer parts of the word first. Initial sound is easiest, then final sound, and then the internal sounds, typically the vowel. So here's a teacher on Twitter. There's so many great teachers on Twitter. And on the Wakelet, I have 4 you had to follow. Kate Wynn is one of them. She's right here in this room. And as you can see, the student has been taught the speech sound. There's the card, the kidlip. There's the grapheme that maps to it, and there is a mirror so they can see them. And it's right as they enter the classroom, so the kids can see it and say, and Kate kind of started something with that. And then here's another teacher. This is Melanie Bredhauer. You had to just see these quick videos. See, she taught the speech sound. She's mapping it to the grapheme. And then all vowels are continuous in voice, and so she says, oh, your voice is on. Right? So isn't that cool? Amazon. Okay. Go to the University of Florida Literacy Institute. We don't have time for this activity, but Robbie the Robot is a great activity for blending and segmenting. It begins with VC and CVs, but it goes all the way up to CCVCC. So it gets increasingly complex with phonemes. I brought these. I think these are so much fun, right? The kids can touch when they make the sounds, and then they change color. So if I want to change the phoneme, but of course I would be adding the what? I would be adding the grapheme too. So you can see a little girl playing the game up there, and then hopping to the speech sounds. But what would Pam Kastner add there? I would add the graphemes, the ones they know and have been taught, right? So we teach systematically from least complex to most complex. This is from UFLI again. This is a great table that shows how phonology and orthography work together, going from least complex to most complex. And I just want to show you a couple spelling errors, and then we'll stop. All right, so this is a second grade spelling sample, and we're looking at grade 1 expectations, CVCs. How do these kids look with CVCs? Let's go back to just the CVCs. How do they look? Yeah, they look pretty similar. We have a reversal over there, but what about when we get to digraphs and blends? Does student 1 have a problem with phonology? Student 1. Are they representing the speech sounds with some kind of grapheme for the most part? We have some things going on with, I think, bridges, right? But no, with drain. But for the most part, I'm not so concerned about the student with phonology. What about student 2? They looked a lot alike with CVCs, but what about student 2? This student cannot move forward with orthography like my friend who's student 1, who has to learn the graphemes, right, that attach to those phonemes that he can or she can analyze. But student 2 has phonology work to do. Spelling is visible language. If you are not doing a spelling inventory, you are missing out. It can be done whole group, 10 minutes max. So when I look at spelling, I look at them through 3 lenses: phonology, orthography, morphology. Are all the speech sounds there? Are they represented by some kind of grapheme? If they are, I know they're at least hearing and analyzing the speech sounds in that word. If they're not, I got to take them back to phoneme grapheme mapping and blending and segmenting and look at my mouth. I do, I do, I do, we 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 do, you do with a partner, you with a partner, you do with a partner, you do. Right? Visible language. The cheapest thing you're ever going to find for diagnostics. So that's, you'll see that on the wakelet. So these are just routines. I have to show you this, I'm sorry, because this is Kate Wynn's. This is a great way to practice. She had taught the skills. She posted this. It's practice, practice, practice. Thank you, Kate Wynn, for letting me show it. Isn't that adorable? They've learned the letter sound correspondence, and before they come in, they just touch and say. When Kate posted that, there was at least, I have a greatest list, actually, Kate, I curated it, but it was like a phenomena, right? All these other teachers started sharing their secret password, but don't they look like they're having fun? Yes. And aren't they getting the practice? Yes. Are they mapping phonemes to graphemes? Yes. And I told you, it's what? At the beginning. It's joyful. And we're teaching all the language systems, and you can look at that. That's the word phoneme through all those different languages. There's some great assessments on there for you and resources on there for you. I knew I wouldn't have enough time. 2 recent guides, please check those out. And resources for Tier 1, Tier 2, and apps, and wakelets, resources, resources, resources. All right, and here I'll just show you my because but so. And maybe while you take your break, you can talk to your friend. Read it with me. Because reading with comprehension is a complex, multifaceted skill that requires both accurate and automatic word reading and language comprehension, both contributing independently and interdependently. Phonemic awareness is an essential foundational literacy skill, but alone it is insufficient for skilled reading. So, as teachers, we have the responsibility to know how to teach, what did I do there? To know how to most effectively teach each contributing component so our children could read and read well. They deserve no less. There's my references. It's a long road, but one worth being on. Thank you for your time, and that's how you can reach me.